It's a cinch. Here, I look up, I look down, I look up.
Roger Ebert didn't hand out the phrase greatest of all time lightly. When he used it, he meant influence, craft, and emotional impact. These weren't just classics, they reshaped the cinema itself. And at the very top of his list sat a film that changed everything. Number 11, Citizen Kane.
Be careful, Charles.
Kane.
Pull your muffler around your neck, Charles.
Kane,
When Roger Ebert spoke about the greatest movie ever made, he returned again and again to Citizen Kane. Not out of obligation, not because critics were expected to, but because he believed it permanently altered what cinema could do. Released in 1941, the film tells the story of Charles Foster Kane, a powerful newspaper magnate whose death sparks a reporter's investigation into his final word, Rosebud. The narrative unfolds through interviews, fragmented memories, and conflicting perspectives. It is not a straight line, it is a mosaic. Ebert often emphasized how revolutionary that structure was. At a time when most films followed chronological storytelling, Citizen Kane fractured time. It presented a life not as a simple arc, but as a collection of subjective recollections. Truth became elusive, identity became layered. Technically, the film pushed boundaries that would influence generations. Deep focus cinematography allowed foreground and background action to remain sharp simultaneously, creating visual complexity within a single frame. Ebert admired how that technique gave viewers freedom to choose where to look, making scenes feel alive rather than staged. The camera moved in ways audiences had rarely seen before. It glided through spaces. It shot from low angles that revealed ceilings, something studio films typically avoided. These choices were not gimmicks. They reinforced Kane's towering ego and isolation. But what truly elevated the film in Ebert's eyes was its emotional core. Kane is not portrayed as a simple villain or hero. He is ambitious, charismatic, generous, and deeply flawed. His pursuit of power gradually erodes his relationships. The film suggests that success without connection leads to emptiness. Violence is not physical here, it is psychological. Marriages collapse. Friendships fracture. Public image masks private loneliness. Ebert often wrote that great films reveal human truth beneath spectacle. Citizen Kane does exactly that. The mystery of Rosebud is less about the object itself and more about longing. The film implies that no investigation can fully explain a person's life. Identity resists summary, memory distorts. Ebert believed Citizen Kane did not simply excel at filmmaking craft. It expanded the medium's vocabulary. Every film that experiments with nonlinear storytelling, layered perspective, or complex character study owes something to its innovation. It was bold, it was technically groundbreaking, it was emotionally resonant. And in Ebert's view, it earned its place at the summit not because critics agreed, but because cinema was never the same after it. Number 10, The Godfather.
Now, why would I ever consider paying more than that? Because I intend to squeeze you.
When Roger Ebert discussed the greatest films ever made, The Godfather was never far from the conversation. He did not see it merely as a gangster movie. He saw it as a defining American epic, one that reshaped popular cinema while appearing almost classical on the surface. Released in 1972, the film follows the Corleone crime family as power transitions from aging patriarch Vito Corleone to his reluctant son, Michael. The premise sounds like organized crime melodrama, but Ebert believed the film transcended genre. It transformed a story about mobsters into a meditation on family, capitalism, loyalty, and moral corrosion. What impressed Ebert most was the film's control. Director Francis Ford Coppola approached violence with restraint. The most famous executions are not chaotic spectacles. They are deliberate, almost ceremonial. When Michael orders a series of assassinations during the baptism sequence, the editing crosscuts between sacred ritual and calculated murder. The juxtaposition forces the audience to confront hypocrisy rather than cheer dominance. Ebert often wrote about how The Godfather changed the tone of mainstream filmmaking. Before it, crime films often glamorized or sensationalized the underworld. Here, crime is business. Meetings occur around tables in dim rooms. Decisions are made quietly. Power shifts through conversation as much as gunfire. That understated approach influenced nearly every gangster film that followed. Michael Corleone's transformation is the emotional spine of the film. He begins as an outsider to the family's operations, insisting he is different. Gradually, he becomes more ruthless than his father ever was. Ebert admired how the film charted that shift patiently. There is no single explosive moment where Michael turns. It is a series of compromises, each one tightening the trap. The cinematography also marked a turning point. Gordon Willis bathed scenes in shadow, allowing faces to emerge from darkness. The visual language suggested secrecy and moral ambiguity. Studios initially resisted the low lighting, but it became iconic. Crime films after The Godfather embraced similar tonal darkness. Ebert believed the film resonated because it understood contradiction. The Corleones are capable of tenderness and brutality. They speak of honor while orchestrating murder. The audience is drawn into empathy even as violence unfolds. The Godfather did not simply dominate the box office. It redefined what serious commercial cinema could achieve. It proved that a gangster film could operate as Shakespearean tragedy. And in doing so, it permanently changed the scale and ambition of American movies. Number 9, Casablanca.
A businessman to appreciate an offer of 100,000 francs.
I appreciate it, but I don't accept it.
I'll raise it to...
When Roger Ebert wrote about Casablanca, he was careful not to dismiss it as simply beloved nostalgia. He believed its greatness came from how effortlessly it balanced romance, politics, and moral awakening within a studio framework that rarely allowed such complexity. Released in 1942, during the height of World War II, the film unfolds in a Moroccan nightclub owned by Rick Blaine, an American expatriate who claims neutrality, while refugees desperately seek passage out of Nazi-occupied Europe. The premise could have been simple melodrama. Instead, it became something far richer. Ebert admired how the film allowed character to evolve under pressure. Rick begins as detached and cynical, insisting he sticks his neck out for no one. But the arrival of his former lover Ilsa and her resistance leader husband forces him to confront his own moral boundaries. The story becomes less about romance and more about responsibility. What elevated Casablanca in Ebert's view was its emotional precision. Dialogue feels effortless yet sharp. Lines like, "Here's looking at you, kid," endure not because they are catchy, but because they carry layered feeling. The script manages wit, longing, and political urgency without collapsing under its own ambition. The film's treatment of sacrifice marked a turning point in mainstream storytelling. Rick's ultimate decision is not driven by ego or personal victory. It is driven by recognition that larger stakes demand personal loss. Ebert believed this moral pivot gave the film enduring power. It suggested that heroism lies in relinquishing desire rather than fulfilling it. Visually, Casablanca operates within the elegant black and white style of its era, but the lighting and composition enhance emotional tension. Close-ups linger on faces during moments of internal struggle. Shadows stretch across walls, reflecting the uncertainty of a world at war. Unlike many wartime films that leaned heavily into propaganda, Casablanca integrates politics organically. The resistance cause is present, but it never overwhelms the intimate human story. That balance influenced countless later films that sought to merge romance with historical crisis. Ebert also emphasized the ensemble strength. Supporting characters are vividly drawn, each representing different responses to fear and occupation. The nightclub becomes a microcosm of global tension. Casablanca did not invent cinematic romance or political drama, but it perfected their fusion. It demonstrated that a studio film could be emotionally sophisticated without sacrificing accessibility. And that, in Ebert's estimation, that rare combination is precisely what makes it one of the greatest films ever made. Number 8, Raging Bull.
The Bronx Bull, the Raging Bull. Let's hear for the great Jake LaMotta.
When Roger Ebert wrote about Raging Bull, he did not describe it as simply a boxing movie. He saw it as one of the most uncompromising character studies ever put on screen, a film that used violence not for spectacle, but for psychological excavation. Released in 1980, the film chronicles the rise and collapse of boxer Jake LaMotta. On the surface, it follows familiar sports drama beats. An underdog climbs, a champion defends his title. But Ebert understood that the boxing ring was not the true battleground. The real conflict unfolds inside LaMotta's mind. What set Raging Bull apart in Ebert's eyes was its refusal to soften its protagonist. Jake is jealous, paranoid, and self-destructive. He alienates his wife, sabotages friendships, and undermines his own success. The film does not offer excuses for his brutality. It presents it plainly. The fight scenes are not choreographed as triumphant athletic showcases. They are chaotic, punishing, and almost abstract. Sweat, blood, and flashing bulbs fill the frame. The camera moves with violent intensity, immersing the viewer rather than providing comfortable distance. Ebert admired how director Martin Scorsese transformed boxing into metaphor. Every punch feels like an externalization of Jake's internal rage. The decision to shoot the film in black and white also reinforced its stark tone. The absence of color strips away glamour. The ring becomes a harsh, high-contrast arena where flesh and sweat dominate the image. Outside the ring, shadows cling to cramped apartments and smoky nightclubs. The visual language mirrors moral decay. Ebert frequently wrote about films that confront the audience rather than reassure them. Raging Bull does exactly that. There is no redemptive arc in the conventional sense. Jake achieves championship glory, but it does not heal him. His downfall feels inevitable, shaped by insecurity and pride. The film's later scenes, showing Jake overweight and alone, carry devastating weight. He rehearses lines in a mirror, clinging to fragments of identity. Ebert believed these moments elevated the film beyond sports biography. They revealed the emptiness left when self-worth is built on dominance. Raging Bull did not aim for broad comfort or commercial appeal. It was raw, personal, and at times painful to watch. Yet, in Ebert's view, that honesty made it monumental. It demonstrated that cinema could confront toxic masculinity, insecurity, and violence without romanticizing any of it. And that uncompromising clarity secured its place among the greatest films ever made. Number 7, 2001, A Space Odyssey.
Hi.
Good morning, sir.
Morning.
We haven't seen you up here for a long time.
Oh, very nice.
When Roger Ebert wrote about 2001, A Space Odyssey, he did not treat it as ordinary science fiction. He saw it as a cinematic landmark, a film that expanded the medium's language in ways few others had dared attempt. For Ebert, its greatness lay in ambition and execution. Released in 1968, the film traces human evolution from prehistoric apes discovering tools to astronauts traveling beyond Jupiter. The narrative is sparse and deliberately paced. Long stretches unfold without dialogue. Ebert believed that silence was not emptiness, but invitation. The film asks the audience to observe, interpret, and reflect, rather than simply consume plot. One of the most revolutionary moments occurs early on. An ape throws a bone into the sky, and the image cuts abruptly to a spacecraft orbiting Earth. That single edit collapses millions of years into one elegant visual transition. Ebert often cited this as one of the most profound cuts in film history. It demonstrated how cinema could convey vast historical and philosophical ideas through pure imagery. The film's use of music further altered expectations. Instead of a traditional orchestral score composed specifically for the story, classical pieces accompany the imagery. Strauss waltzes underscore the graceful movement of spacecraft, transforming mechanical motion into choreography. Ebert admired how this choice elevated space travel from technical feat to poetic spectacle. The portrayal of artificial intelligence through Hole 9,000 deepens the film's philosophical scope. Hal is calm, articulate, and unsettlingly human. The tension does not arise from explosive battle, but from subtle malfunction and moral ambiguity. Ebert recognized that this depiction of machine consciousness influenced decades of science fiction cinema that followed. Visually, the film was groundbreaking. Realistic spacecraft design, rotating sets, and painstaking attention to detail created an immersive sense of space. The environments felt tangible and vast. Ebert argued that the film redefined what audiences expected from visual effects, shifting them toward realism rather than fantasy. The final sequence, often called the Star Gate, remains one of the most discussed passages in film history. Abstract imagery, shifting colors, and cosmic transformation challenged traditional narrative logic. Ebert did not believe the sequence required literal explanation. Its power lay in evoking awe and uncertainty. 2001. A Space Odyssey did not provide easy answers. It posed questions about evolution, technology, and humanity's place in the universe. For Ebert, that willingness to confront the unknown elevated it beyond genre. It proved that cinema could be philosophical without losing spectacle, and in doing so, it changed the scale of what movies could dare to imagine. Number 6. La Dolce Vita.
Where did it go for that meal?
When Roger Ebert wrote about La Dolce Vita, he described it as a film that captured the spiritual exhaustion of modern life with startling clarity. It was not simply a portrait of celebrity culture or nightlife in Rome. In Ebert's view, it was a turning point in how cinema explored alienation. Released in 1960, the film follows Marcello, a journalist drifting through Rome's glamorous social circles. He moves from parties to film sets to aristocratic gatherings, chasing stories and sensations. Yet beneath the elegance lies emptiness. Ebert believed the film changed cinema by daring to portray that emptiness without moralizing. The structure is episodic rather than traditionally plotted. The scenes unfold as encounters rather than chapters in a clear narrative arc. Marcello meets actors, intellectuals, aristocrats, and dreamers, but no experience delivers fulfillment. Ebert admired how this loose structure mirrored the character's emotional drift. The film refuses tidy resolution. Visually, La Dolce Vita blends grandeur and decay. The famous image of Anita Ekberg wading through the Trevi Fountain is both sensual and surreal. The spectacle draws the eye, yet it is tinged with melancholy. Ebert often emphasized that director Federico Fellini did not glamorize decadence. He observed it with fascination and skepticism. What elevated the film in Ebert's estimation was its moral ambiguity. Marcello is neither hero nor villain. He is charming, curious, and increasingly disillusioned. His pursuit of excitement leads him further from meaning. The film does not condemn him outright. It simply shows the cost of perpetual distraction. The final sequence lingers in Ebert's writing. Marcello stands on a beach after an all-night party, separated by distance and noise from a young woman calling out to him. He cannot hear her. The moment feels symbolic of lost connection. Ebert believed that quiet image encapsulated the film's theme. Modern life can drown out what truly matters. La Dolce Vita also influenced narrative freedom in later cinema. Its episodic form encouraged filmmakers to explore character psychology over conventional plot mechanics. It opened the door for more introspective storytelling in mainstream and art house film alike. Ebert saw in this film a bold declaration that cinema could examine spiritual fatigue without offering simple answers. It captured a generation suspended between glamour and disillusionment, and in doing so, it redefined what a major motion picture could dare to confront. Number 5. Vertigo 19. When Roger Ebert wrote about Vertigo, he did not treat it as merely a suspense film. He called it one of the greatest explorations of obsession ever put on screen. Over time, he elevated it above many of Alfred Hitchcock's other masterpieces, believing it deepened with every viewing. Released in 1958, the film follows Scotty Ferguson, a former detective crippled by acrophobia, who becomes entangled in a mysterious woman named Madeline. What begins as surveillance turns into infatuation, then into fixation. Ebert believed the film transformed the thriller into psychological tragedy. At its core, Vertigo is not about solving a mystery. It is about the dangerous desire to reshape reality. Scotty does not simply love Madeline, he attempts to recreate her, to impose an ideal onto another human being. That theme of control and projection gave the film emotional weight beyond its suspense mechanics. Ebert admired how Hitchcock used visual language to express inner turmoil. The famous dolly zoom effect conveys Scotty's vertigo not just physically, but emotionally. Colors shift throughout the film, especially the haunting green glow associated with Madeline. These choices do not decorate the story. They externalize obsession. The film's pacing also sets it apart. Instead of racing toward revelation, it lingers. Long stretches unfold with minimal dialogue. Scotty follows Madeline through San Francisco's streets and graveyards, and the repetition creates mood rather than action. Ebert believed this patience allowed viewers to feel the gradual tightening of psychological tension. One of the most radical aspects of Vertigo is its narrative structure. The mystery is resolved earlier than expected. What remains is the aftermath. The second half becomes an examination of grief and manipulation. Scotty's attempt to transform Judy into the image of Madeleine is unsettling. Love becomes coercion. Romance becomes reconstruction. Ebert often emphasized how daring this shift was for mainstream cinema. Instead of delivering a conventional triumphant resolution, the film descends into tragedy. Scotty's obsession destroys any possibility of happiness. The final scene leaves viewers with shock rather than reassurance. Vertigo also expanded the emotional range of the thriller genre. It proved suspense could coexist with melancholy and existential dread. Later filmmakers drew from its exploration of identity, illusion, and desire. In Ebert's view, Vertigo endured because it refuses easy comfort. It examines the human tendency to fall in love with fantasies rather than people. And in doing so, it elevated suspense into something profoundly unsettling and unforgettable. Number 4. Lawrence of Arabia.
Who is he?
When Roger Ebert wrote about Lawrence of Arabia, he described it as one of the supreme achievements of epic filmmaking. It was not simply a historical adventure. It was a study of personality set against a vast, unforgiving landscape. In Ebert's estimation, it demonstrated how spectacle and psychology could coexist at the highest level. Released in 1962, the film chronicles the journey of T.E. Lawrence, a British officer who becomes a key figure in the Arab Revolt during the First World War. On its surface, it contains all the elements of classic epic cinema: sweeping desert vistas, cavalry charges, political intrigue. Yet, Ebert believed its greatness came from how it interrogated its own hero. The desert is not just scenery, it is character. Director David Lean frames the horizon as endless and indifferent, dwarfing the men who cross it. Long, silent stretches emphasize isolation and scale. Ebert often pointed to the famous entrance of Sheriff Ali, emerging slowly from a heat shimmer on the horizon. The moment is patient and hypnotic. Cinema becomes mythic without feeling artificial. What elevates the film beyond pageantry is its exploration of Lawrence himself. He is charismatic, intelligent, and increasingly intoxicated by his own legend. The film does not treat him as a simple hero. It reveals his vanity, his appetite for danger, and his confusion about identity. Ebert admired how the narrative refuses to flatten him into patriotic iconography. Violence in the film is not romanticized. The attack on a Kaaba is thrilling, yet it carries weight. Later, when Lawrence participates in brutal reprisals, the tone darkens. The exhilaration of conquest gives way to moral ambiguity. Ebert believed this shift was crucial. The film acknowledges the seductive pull of power and the cost of wielding it. Visually, Lawrence of Arabia remains breathtaking. The cinematography captures light and shadow across sand in ways few films have matched. Lean uses wide compositions to emphasize grandeur, but he also employs intimate close-ups to reveal emotional fracture. The balance between epic scope and interior conflict impressed Ebert deeply. The score by Maureen Jarre adds to the mythic quality, yet it never overwhelms the narrative. Music underscores transformation rather than dictating emotion. Ebert often praised films that trusted audiences to absorb scale without constant reinforcement. Lawrence of Arabia also influenced generations of filmmakers who sought to merge historical storytelling with psychological depth. It proved that large-scale cinema did not have to sacrifice character complexity. In Ebert's view, it stood as evidence that mainstream epic filmmaking could aspire to art. It was grand without being hollow, spectacular without losing introspection, and that rare fusion secured its place among the greatest films ever made. Number 3. The Third Man.
There's no proof against me. Besides you.
When Roger Ebert wrote about The Third Man, he treated it as more than a classic film noir. He saw it as one of the sharpest explorations of post-war disillusionment ever captured on screen. In his estimation, it demonstrated how style could intensify moral complexity rather than distract from it. Released in 1949 and set in a divided, occupied Vienna after the Second World War, the film follows American writer Holly Martins as he arrives to reconnect with his old friend Harry Lime, only to discover that Lime has allegedly died under suspicious circumstances. What begins as a mystery quickly transforms into a meditation on corruption, loyalty, and betrayal. Ebert admired the film's atmosphere. Vienna is portrayed as fractured and shadowed, a city carved into sectors by competing powers. Rubble fills the streets, black markets thrive. The setting reflects moral collapse. Director Carol Reed and cinematographer Robert Krasker used tilted camera angles and stark lighting to create unease. The visual distortion mirrors the instability of the world being depicted. One of the film's most enduring elements is its use of music. The zither score by Anton Kara feels at once playful and unsettling. Ebert often pointed out how unusual it was for a thriller to rely on such a distinctive, almost ironic soundtrack. The music creates tonal contrast, emphasizing the absurdity beneath tragedy. The central relationship between Martins and Lime anchors the story. Lime, revealed to be alive and profiting from diluted penicillin sales that harm children, embodies post-war cynicism. He justifies his crimes with chilling detachment. Ebert frequently cited Lime's famous cuckoo clock speech as an example of cinema's ability to merge charm and moral emptiness in a single moment. Violence in The Third Man is restrained but impactful. Gunfire erupts in confined spaces, particularly in the final chase through Vienna's sewer system. The sequence is tense and claustrophobic, devoid of glamour. The pursuit feels desperate rather than triumphant. Ebert believed this refusal to romanticize confrontation gave the film lasting power. The ending is famously uncompromising. After Lime's fate is sealed, Martins waits for acknowledgement from Lime's lover. The camera lingers in a long take as she walks past him without a glance. There is no reconciliation, no reward, just quiet finality. Ebert praised this ending as one of the bravest in cinema, denying the audience sentimental closure. The Third Man influenced decades of crime and noir filmmaking through its visual style, moral ambiguity, and atmospheric tension. It demonstrated that thrillers could grapple with political and ethical complexity without sacrificing suspense. For Ebert, it was proof that a film could be stylish, entertaining, and philosophically sharp all at once. And that rare combination secured its place among the greatest films ever made. Number 2, The Rules of the Game. When Roger Ebert wrote about the rules of the game, he did so with a sense of reverence. He called it one of the most profound films ever made about society and illusion. In his view, it did not simply tell a story, it dissected an entire class structure with elegance and irony. Released in 1939, on the eve of the Second World War, the film unfolds over the course of a country weekend gathering at a French estate. Aristocrats, servants, aviators, lovers, and opportunists mingle in a delicate dance of flirtation and deception. On the surface, it feels light, almost comedic, but Ebert believed that beneath its charm lies a devastating social critique. What makes the film extraordinary is its ensemble structure. There is no single dominant protagonist. Instead, the camera moves fluidly between characters, capturing overlapping conversations and shifting alliances. Ebert often pointed out how director Jean Renoir used deep focus and extended takes to allow action to unfold across multiple planes. The viewer is free to choose where to look, creating a sense of living space rather than stage performance. The film's title is literal and ironic. Everyone understands the rules of behavior within their class. Affairs are tolerated as long as decorum is maintained. Jealousy is hidden behind smiles. Servants mirror the emotional entanglements of their employers. Ebert admired how Renoir presented hypocrisy without heavy-handed condemnation. The satire is gentle but unmistakable. Violence enters unexpectedly. A hunting sequence in which rabbits and birds are slaughtered interrupts the frivolity. The scene is both literal and symbolic. Ebert believed this moment exposes the cruelty beneath aristocratic leisure. Life can be extinguished casually in the name of sport or pride. The final act delivers tragedy not through grand spectacle, but through misunderstanding and adherence to those same unspoken rules. A character is shot, and the death is quickly absorbed into social etiquette. Politeness overrides grief, appearances are preserved. Ebert often wrote that this quiet normalization of tragedy made the film prophetic. It depicted a society so obsessed with manners that it failed to confront its own decay. The Rules of the Game was initially met with hostility and even censorship in France. Audiences were unsettled by its portrayal of moral emptiness among the elite. Ebert saw that rejection as evidence of its power. It held up a mirror at a moment when few wished to look. The film influenced generations of directors who sought to combine social commentary with fluid cinematic technique. Its blend of comedy, tragedy, and political insight reshaped narrative possibilities. For Ebert, it stood near the summit of cinema because it captured human folly with compassion and clarity. And in doing so, it transcended its era to become timeless. Number 1. Citizen Kane. When Roger Ebert wrote about Citizen Kane, he did not treat it as sacred simply because critics had long crowned it. He believed it earned that status through invention, emotional depth, and influence. For Ebert, it was the film that permanently changed what movies could do. Released in 1941, Citizen Kane tells the story of Charles Foster Kane, a powerful newspaper magnate whose dying word, Rosebud, launches a reporter's investigation into his life. Instead of unfolding chronologically, the story is told through interviews and memories. Each person offers a different version of Kane. No account feels complete. Ebert believed this fractured structure was revolutionary. It rejected the idea that a life could be summarized in a straight line. Truth becomes layered, contradictory, shaped by perspective. Later films that rely on non-linear storytelling or multiple viewpoints trace their lineage directly to this approach. Technically, the film expanded cinematic language. Deep focus cinematography allowed foreground and background to remain sharp at the same time. Characters could move within a single frame while action unfolded behind them. Ebert admired how this technique empowered viewers to explore the image rather than be guided by quick cuts. Low-angle shots revealing ceilings were equally groundbreaking. They made Kane appear imposing, larger than life. As his emotional world shrinks, however, the spaces around him grow emptier. The vast rooms of his estate feel cavernous and cold. Ebert often noted how visual scale mirrors psychological isolation. Yet for all its technical brilliance, Ebert insisted that Citizen Kane endures because of its humanity. Kane is not a simple villain. He begins as an idealist who claims he wants to serve the public. Gradually, ambition morphs into control. Relationships deteriorate. His need for admiration overwhelms his capacity for intimacy. The famous mystery of Rosebud is less about solving a riddle and more about confronting longing. It represents childhood, innocence, a time before power complicated identity. Ebert believed the film's genius lay in suggesting that no investigation can fully capture a person. A life resists summary. The newsroom scenes crackle with energy, while later moments unfold in silence and regret. The film balances wit, tragedy, and spectacle without losing coherence. Every technical flourish supports character. Citizen Kane did not simply innovate visually. It proved that cinema could be psychologically layered, structurally daring, and emotionally resonant all at once. For Ebert, it was not just influential, it was foundational. It expanded the medium's vocabulary, and it still speaks fluently today. Ebert believed greatness in film meant lasting impact. These movies did not merely entertain, they redefined what cinema could achieve. At the top stood a film that reshaped narrative, technique, and character in one bold stroke. And decades later, its influence remains undeniable.